Inaya was a young man, all alone in Sangora village. His parents were no more, so he had to take care of himself. He lived in a small hut far from the village center and was a hunter. But Inaya never caught big animals. Every day he would return, home with small bush rats or tiny grass cutters. The other hunters would laugh at him, saying, "Inaya, when you catch something big, then come talk to us." But Inaya didn't mind. He knew he was trying his best. He would take the small animals to Mama Zainabu's shop, where he traded them for food. Mama Zainabu liked Inaya because he was always polite, even when others mocked him. The villagers didn't like him much. They judged him for his simple clothes and quiet nature. Even his friends left him, believing he wasn't good enough. They would taunt, "Inaya, you're a failure. Look at your small catch." Still, Inaya remained kind, even when it was difficult. He didn't have much, but he kept his head high, hoping one day things would change. Even though life was tough, he never lost his good heart. He never shouted back at those who laughed at him. Instead, he focused on hunting, hoping for a big catch, one that never seemed to come. But deep down, Inaya knew he had something greater: his heart. One early morning, as the sun rose and birds sang, Inaya walked towards the forest. On his way, he saw two beautiful sisters, Adia and Zalika. They stood by the path, laughing and talking. Being the kind man he was, Inaya smiled and greeted them. "Good morning, sisters." Adia and Zalika exchanged looks and then burst into laughter. Inaya was confused but hid it well. He gathered his courage and asked, "May I speak with one of you?" He thought maybe, just maybe, one of them would give him a chance. But Adia, with a cruel smile, replied, "Even if we were dead, our bodies wouldn't accept your proposal, Inaya." Zalika added, "Look at you, with your tiny catch and your ragged clothes. What could you possibly offer anyone?" Their words stung like a sharp thorn. Inaya felt his heart sink, but he didn't respond. He simply watched as they laughed and walked away, leaving him feeling small and alone. That evening, despite the pain in his heart, Inaya went hunting again. He tried his best. By nightfall, he had caught 2 grass cutters and 2 bush rats. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Maybe I can sell these at the market," he thought, holding on to hope. So, with renewed determination, he took his catch to the village market. Though Adia and Zalika's cruel words still echoed in his mind, he reminded himself that he was more than their mockery. He had his own strength, and that was enough. At the market, Inaya laid out his catch, hoping to earn a few coins for food. But then, to his surprise, he saw Adia and Zalika approaching. With sly smiles, they walked up to him. "Inaya, we want to buy some bushmeat," Adia said sweetly, pretending to be interested. Inaya, surprised but hopeful, replied, "Each bush rat is 7 silver coins, but I will sell them to you for 5 silver coins each." He was willing to lower the price, hoping for fairness this time. Zalika reached into her bag, counted 10 coins, and held them up. "Here's your money," she said. Trusting them, Inaya handed over the bushmeat. But instead of paying him, Adia snatched the meat, and the 2 sisters turned away, laughing. Inaya stood frozen. He had been tricked. They had taken his meat without paying. His heart sank even deeper. The villagers saw what had happened, but instead of helping him, they laughed. "Inaya, you can't even sell your catch without being cheated," they mocked. Crushed, Inaya didn't let the tears show. He quietly picked up his remaining grass cutters and walked away. Life seemed to be getting harder. Everything was going wrong. Yet despite the pain, Inaya kept hope alive. Deep down, he believed that one day things would change. One hot afternoon, after a long day of hunting, Inaya went to the stream to bathe. As he approached, he heard quiet sobs. Curious, he followed the sound and found a large woman sitting by the water, her face buried in her hands. She was crying all alone. Being gentle and kind, Inaya stepped closer. "Hello," he said softly. "Why are you crying?" The woman looked up, surprised to see him. Her name was Amarachi, and with tears in her eyes she whispered, "I cry because people mock me. They call me names because of my size. No one wants to be my friend, and everyone laughs at me." Inaya listened carefully. He understood her pain. He knew what it felt like to be laughed at. But instead of joining in the cruelty, Inaya smiled and said, "You are beautiful." Amarachi stopped crying. No one had ever said that to her before. She looked at him, unsure if he was telling the truth. But Inaya meant every word. "You are beautiful," he repeated. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Amarachi wiped her tears and smiled a little. For the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt before: hope. Before leaving, Inaya said, "I will come back to see you at sunset." Amarachi was surprised. No one had ever promised to visit her. She wasn't sure if he really would. But Inaya nodded and left, leaving her with a small glimmer of happiness. In her heart, for the first time, someone had seen her. Not just her size, but who she was inside. And that someone was Inaya. That evening, as the sun set and stars twinkled in the sky, Inaya kept his promise. He walked to Amarachi's hut, feeling a little nervous but determined. When he arrived, Amarachi was sitting outside, cooking a simple meal. She looked up, surprised to see him. "You really came," she said softly, almost in disbelief. "Of course," Inaya replied with a smile. "I told you I would." They sat together, talking quietly under the stars. Amarachi shared her story, how she had moved to Sangora village a year ago, but no one wanted to be her friend because of her size. She spent her days making beautiful crafts, but she had no one to share them with. She told Inaya how lonely she felt. Inaya listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. "I understand," he said. "The villagers laugh at me too. They think I'm not good enough because I don't catch big animals, but I've learned that what others say doesn't matter. You are special, Amarachi." Amarachi smiled. She had never met someone like Inaya before. He didn't judge her, he didn't laugh at her. He saw her as a person, not just her size. Before leaving, Inaya handed Amarachi one of his bush rats. "This is for you," he said. Amarachi was touched. It wasn't much, but to her it meant the world. No one had ever given her anything like that before. From that night on, Inaya visited Amarachi every evening. They would sit for hours, sharing stories and laughter, and slowly they became closer. Amarachi no longer felt alone, and for the first time, Inaya found comfort in someone who understood his heart. With each passing day, Inaya and Amarachi's bond grew stronger. They found comfort in each other's company, looking forward to every evening spent together. What had started as companionship had now become something deeper, something neither of them had expected, but cherished nonetheless. As time went on, Inaya and Amarachi became inseparable. Inaya would visit Amarachi every evening, sometimes bringing her small gifts, a fresh catch from his hunt or some ripe fruit. In return, Amarachi made sure Inaya never went hungry, often bringing food to his hut. They laughed, shared stories, and for the first time in their lives felt truly understood. But the villagers noticed, and as always, they couldn't keep quiet. "Look at them," one woman scoffed. "Two outcasts clinging to each other. The poor hunter and the elephant. What? A pair. They belong together," a man sneered. "No one else would want them." The whispers spread through Sangora village like wildfire. People pointed and laughed whenever they saw Inaya and Amarachi walking side by side. But Inaya didn't care. He had long since grown used to the villagers' cruel words. He had something they could never take away: his friendship with Amarachi. Amarachi, however, wasn't as immune to the gossip. Their taunts stung, reopening old wounds she had tried to heal. Yet when she was with Inaya, the pain seemed to fade. He made her feel valued, cherished, something she had never experienced before. She admired the way Inaya never let their words affect him, and so she tried to be strong, just like him. Together, they created their own little world, one where the villagers' cruelty could not reach them. Their bond deepened, and even though life was far from perfect, they found happiness in each other. One bright afternoon, Inaya and Amarachi decided to visit the central bazaar together. They wanted to buy a few things and enjoy some time outside. As they strolled through the village, talking and laughing, they suddenly spotted Adia and Zalika approaching. The two sisters halted in their tracks, staring at them before exchanging wicked smirks. Then the insults began. "Look at the elephant and her tiny hunter," Adia sneered. "Amarachi, do you think you can even fit through the bazaar gate?" Zalika added with a cruel laugh. Amarachi lowered her head, trying to ignore them, but their words cut deep. Inaya's fists clenched. His heart burned with rage, but he knew he couldn't act recklessly. The village forbade men from raising a hand against women, and he couldn't risk bringing more trouble upon them. "Leave her alone," Inaya snapped, his voice trembling with fury. "She has done nothing to you." But Adia and Zalika only laughed harder. "Oh, look," Adia mocked. "The little hunter is trying to protect his big elephant." Before Inaya could react, Adia suddenly shoved Amarachi. She stumbled backward and fell into a nearby bush, scraping her arm against the rough branches. Amarachi winced, tears welling in her eyes from both the pain and the humiliation. Inaya rushed to her side, helping her up, his heart hammering with anger. His jaw tightened as he glared at the sisters. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his voice low with barely contained fury. But Adia and Zalika only smirked and walked away, satisfied with what they had done. Inaya helped Amarachi home, his chest heavy with sadness. She cried softly, not just from the pain in her arm, but from the weight of the cruel words that clung to her like a shadow. Sitting beside her, Inaya gently whispered, "They don't know you like I do. You are strong. You are beautiful. Don't let their words break you." Amarachi wiped her tears, nodding slowly, but the sting of the insults lingered, a wound deeper than the one on her arm. Still, with Inaya by her side, she felt a little stronger. Even in moments like this, their bond held firm, and in each other's presence, they found solace, love, and the courage to endure. That night, under the glow of the moon, Inaya and Amarachi sat outside her hut, lost in thought. The silence between them was heavy, yet comforting. The pain of the day still fresh, but the stillness of the night offering a quiet kind of peace. After a long moment, Inaya turned to Amarachi, his heart pounding. He had thought about this for a long time, and tonight felt like the right moment. "Amarachi," he said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion, "will you marry me?" Amarachi's eyes widened in shock. She looked at Inaya, searching his face as if to confirm she had heard him right. But when she saw the sincerity in his eyes, her heart leaped. This was the moment she had dreamed of her entire life, someone who saw her for who she truly was, not for her size or what others said about her. "Yes," Amarachi whispered, his voice full of emotion. "Yes, Inaya, I will marry you." For a moment they just sat there, smiling at each other, their hearts full. But then Amarachi's smile faded slightly. She took a deep breath and said, "Inaya, I have to leave Sangora village tomorrow morning." Inaya was confused. "Why?" he asked gently. "Where are you going?" Amarachi shook her head. "I can't tell you yet," she said, "but I promise I will return soon." Inaya looked at her, uncertain but trusting. He didn't understand why she had to go or where she was headed, but he believed in her. "I'll wait for you," he said quietly, "no matter how long it takes." Amarachi smiled again, grateful for his patience. That night they sat together a little longer, holding on to the promise of a future together, even though the path ahead seemed uncertain. Inaya knew in his heart that Amarachi would come back, and when she did, their lives would change forever. Early the next morning, just as the sun was rising, Amarachi quietly left the village. Inaya watched her go from a distance, feeling a bit lost, but trusting her promise to return. He had no idea where she was, headed or why, but he believed in her words. Days passed, then weeks. Inaya hadn't heard a single word from Amarachi. Every day he went to the central bazaar, the Zambezi riverbank, or deep into the forest, hoping to see her again. But she was nowhere to be found. The villagers noticed her absence, and as usual, they started talking. Inaya's elephant ran away, they said with cruel laughter. She probably left because he couldn't feed her. Who would want to stay with a poor hunter like him? The gossip grew louder every day, and Inaya's heart grew heavier. He missed Amarachi, but he still trusted her. Promise. Even with the villagers laughing behind his back, he held his head high and waited. What the villagers didn't know was that Amarachi had a secret. She wasn't just any woman. She was the queen of a powerful and wealthy village. She had left the Zuberi village to return to her home and prepare for her wedding with Inaya, but she hadn't told him yet. Amarachi wanted someone who loved her for who she truly was, not for her wealth or status. That's why she kept her secret. She knew Inaya saw her as Amarachi, the woman, not Amarachi, the queen, and that made her love him even more. While Inaya waited patiently, enduring the villagers' cruel words, Amarachi was preparing something special for their future. She knew that when the time was right, she would return and everything would change. One hot afternoon, as the villagers went about their daily work, the sound of the town crier's drum echoed through Sangora village. Everyone stopped as the town crier shouted, "Hear ye, hear ye! There will be a grand wedding in 2 days. Everyone is invited. It will be the biggest celebration we have ever seen." The villagers buzzed with excitement. A wedding this grand hadn't happened in years, but Inaya paid little attention. He figured it was just another big event for some important family. He had his own worries, still thinking about Amarachi, still wondering when she would return. The day passed, and as usual, Inaya prepared his hunting gear to head into the forest. He had no plans to attend the wedding. After all, it had nothing to do with him. But just as he was about to leave, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found one of the king's messengers standing there, holding a finely decorated envelope. The messenger handed it to Inaya and said, "You are invited to the wedding as an honored guest." Inaya was stunned. Why would he, a poor hunter, be invited as a special guest to such a grand event? He looked at the invitation, confused, but the messenger only smiled and walked away without explaining anything. Still puzzled, Inaya decided he would go to the wedding after all. Something about the invitation felt important, though he had no idea what awaited him. He set aside his hunting gear and began to prepare for the celebration, not knowing that this wedding was about to change his life forever. The day of the grand wedding finally arrived. The entire village was decorated with colorful cloth and flowers, and people were dressed in their finest clothes. Inaya, who had been given special robes to wear, looked different from his usual self. He was dressed in fine garments and was led to sit beside the king himself. The villagers gasped in surprise. "Why is Inaya, the poor hunter, sitting with the king?" they whispered. Inaya himself was just as confused. He sat there quietly, not knowing why he was being treated like an honored guest. The drums began to play, and the villagers gathered around to witness the grand event. Everyone was eager to see who the bride and groom would be. Finally, the moment arrived. The music grew louder, and the bride stepped forward, her face covered with a beautiful veil. The crowd held their breath as she slowly walked toward the king. Then, with a graceful movement, she lifted the veil. It was Amarachi. The crowd gasped, their jaws dropping in shock. "Amarachi," they whispered, unable to believe their eyes. But this wasn't the Amarachi they knew. She was dressed in the finest clothes, wearing a crown on her head. Amarachi was no ordinary woman, she was a queen. Inaya stared at her in disbelief. His heart raced as he realized what was happening. Amarachi had planned this all along. She had left the village not just to return home, but to prepare for their wedding. She had chosen him, the poor hunter, to be her husband, and now she was revealing her true self to him and the entire village. The villagers who once mocked Amarachi and Inaya now felt ashamed. They had laughed at him for being with her, called her names, and treated them both with disrespect. But now they wished they could take back their cruel words. Amarachi was a queen, and Inaya was no longer the poor hunter they had once looked down on. As Amarachi walked toward Inaya, their eyes met, and she smiled. Inaya's heart swelled with pride and love. He realized that this was the moment he had been waiting for all along. The woman he had stood by, the one the villagers mocked, was now his queen. The village would never look at him the same way again. After the wedding, Amarachi, now the queen, stood before the villagers and spoke. "You have a great king," she said, "but many of you are not kind. You mock those who seem different or poor. It's time to change. Treat everyone with respect, no matter their size or status." The villagers hung their heads in shame, especially Adia and Zalika, who had been the cruelest to Amarachi. As punishment, they were made servants to the newlywed couple. From that day on, the village learned an important lesson about kindness and respect. Inaya and Amarachi ruled with love and fairness. Under their leadership, the people, once filled with gossip and judgment, learned to be kinder and more compassionate. Mocking and judging others based on appearance or status can lead to shame and regret. The villagers, especially Adia and Zalika, ridiculed Inaya for being poor and Amarachi for her size. But in the end, it was Inaya and Amarachi who rose above them, proving that kindness, respect, and inner strength are more important than wealth or appearance. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and subscribe for more enchanting African stories.